Before we get started and some general housekeeping, I know this is first time for some of you to be in person. Take note that your microphone should turn on and off as you speak, unless you have pushed the mute button. You'll have to unmute yourself if you've muted it. Otherwise, your microphone will come on whenever it picks up the noise. So if you're having side conversations or anything like that, just remember that those microphones will be on. So keeping that in mind, just make sure you're unmuted when you talk. And let's see, Laura, looks like we're at 10 o'clock, so let's go ahead and start this. Like we're recording.
We are recording, yes, sir.
Great, thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Real Estate Appraisers Commission. Today's Monday, July 19th, 2021. And since we are a physical quorum, a statement of necessity is not necessary. So I will begin by calling the roll. Mr. Garrison.
Here.
Mr. Mansfield.
Here.
Mr. Atwood.
Here.
Ms. Alexander.
Here.
Dr. Jane.
Here.
Ms. Hayson.
Here.
Absences today are Mr. Bennett and Ms. Cole. Ms. Cole, who I don't believe any of you have had the pleasure of meeting yet, is the newly appointed public member from West Tennessee. She had to travel for a death in the family and could not be here today. So next on our agenda is to adopt the agenda. Mr. Chairman, are there any proposed changes to the agenda before we adopt it?
Yes, under approved minutes, January 2021 needs to be changed to April 19th, 2021. And under new business, we'll discuss the Aero Conference that will be held in Washington, D.C., mid-October.
Okay. Any other changes proposed? All right. We have a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
And a voice vote is sufficient here. Second?
Second.
Okay. All right. Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The agenda is adopted. Now we move to approving the minutes. Questions, comments, anything, Mr. Chairman?
Any revisions or comments concerning the minutes? Hearing none, do I hear a motion? Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Minutes are approved.
Thank you, sir. Given that this is the first in-person meeting, and I think probably about a year and a half, it is my first meeting with you all. And I know most of you are familiar with each other. We did have a couple of new appointments, though, in the absence of physical meetings, so I wanted to take a moment and just recognize that. Ms. Haston from Chattanooga has joined the commission. Dr. Jane has been appointed within the last year, and Ms. Cole, who is not with us today, has also been appointed. I don't know if either of you would like to say anything or a little, okay? No? All right. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure you all had the opportunity. So with that, I guess we can move to the legal report. Oh, and should say that Ms. Erica Smith is, should we say filling in? But she is taking on the role of the disciplinary attorney for the time being. for this commission.
So yes, Erica is graciously filling in for us until we have a new disciplinary counsel. Regarding the legal report, if you notice, I put a note in the email asking if anyone wanted to talk about specific cases. I didn't receive any emails, so I know that means we probably want to talk about a couple. Are there any specific cases that the commissioners would like to discuss?
All of them.
Want us to read all of the cases?
Yep. Maybe not the first one. What do you think about the first one?
The ones that I had marked not to do it was 1, 2, 4, and 8. Don't know if other commissioners would want to discuss. 1 and 2, I think, seemed fairly cut and dry. 4 and 8.
So for those, would you like me to just read the case number?
Right, we would have to read the case number into record.
And the recommendation?
And recommendation.
Okay.
Right.
And then we'll discuss.
We could probably do them as a group.
Okay.
I would like to discuss 4 and 8.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll just do 1 and 2 then that way. Okay. So number 1 is 2021019-301. And council's recommendation is to close. And number 2 is 2021008-031, and council's recommendation is to close.
You have recommendation on those 2 cases. Do I hear a motion? Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. So we'll start in on number 3.
Number 3 is 2021029-931. And would it be okay if I summarize? Okay. So this complaint was submitted with allegations by the complainant that many things were missing from the appraisal of their home that caused the value to be significantly lower than it should have been, alleging that this caused a buyer to back out. And the complainant gave very specific allegations about what was missing and what was wrong, and the respondent did file a response and addressed each of those allegations and basically acknowledged that they were correct and accepted that they had maybe missed some things, or that the report was incomplete or incorrect in the ways that the complainant alleged. The complainant did file a follow-up communication with counsel after they filed the complaint and after the response was received, stating that the respondent has provided an updated appraisal and willingly corrected the errors and omissions that directly resulted in the collapse of the first contract. An expert review was conducted of the original appraisal, and the expert concluded that the appraisal is not credible due to numerous USPAP violations related to there not being any data summary in the appraisal that supports the property value trend, demand, supply, and marketing time. The highest and best use section did not address conformance to current zoning. The appraisal missed many physical attributes of the subject property. The appraisal missed many physical attributes of the subject in the sales comparison approach. The reconciliation states that most consideration is given the sales comparison approach, but it implies that another approach to the value was developed. However, the cost and income approaches were not developed. There's no cost approach in the appraisal, which is typical and acceptable for condominiums, but the comments are boilerplate, and none of them are applicable in the valuation of the subject property since the cost approach was not completed. The income approach reports that it was not developed. However, the reasons for its exclusion or that lack of development are not reported. In the project information section under the general description, it's reported that units in the subject properties have 1 story. However, subject and all comps have 2 stories. And then last, the market conditions addendum to the appraisal report is blank. Therefore, council recommends authorizing a consent order assessing a $1,000 civil penalty and requiring 14 hours of report writing, 14 hours of sales comparison, 4 hours of reconciliation, and 4 hours of highest and best use continuing education hours to be completed within 180 days of the execution of the consent order. And then all of that will be completed in addition to the minimum CE requirement for license renewal.
Very good, thank you. We have a recommendation. Is there any discussion or a motion?
I have a question.
Okay.
The history of this respondent indicates none in the last 5 years. My question is, why did we stop at 5 years? When did that, we used to have the history dating back to forever.
I can't answer when we changed that or why, but I did consult with our chief counsel because I noticed in some prior legal reports that it stopped at 5 years, and he confirmed that that I think all around with all programs, that's what we do. Since when, I don't know, but I do have the history noted in a separate file, and there is disciplinary history before the past 5 years.
This respondent?
Yes.
Do you have it at your fingertips? Yes. Would you like to read that to us, please?
Yes, let me get to it really quick for you.
While she's looking that up, Chairman Garrison, when a motion and a second has been stated, can you restate those before the vote? Just who made them,
okay,
since we don't have video for this meeting.
Okay, and I have that prior discipline. So it looks like in 2011, there was a consent order that was signed by the respondent where they were issued a $500 civil penalty and had to take 30 hours of basic appraisal procedures. And then in 2012, they signed another consent order with a $500 civil penalty, a 15-hour site valuation and cost approach course, and a 15-hour market analysis and highest and best use course. In 2013, there was another consent order signed by the respondent where they had to take a 15-hour residential report writing and case studies course. And then in 2015, there was a consent order signed by the respondent with a $1,000 civil penalty and a 7-hour supervisor trainee course and a 15-hour residential report writing course. Nothing in the past 6 years, and then those 4 consent orders going back to 2011.
If you would like in the future for us to provide the discipline that we have recorded, we can do that. Okay, we'll do that moving forward. Just letting you know, any kind of matters that are a little bit older behind, like 2015, 2014, sometimes we don't have the exact specifics because we didn't have them logged, so we'll provide as much information as we have.
Further discussion?
It appears to me that the courses that have previously been retaken didn't do any good. They're not, according to the expert reviewer, the appraiser is still not supporting his market value trends. He's not supporting highest and best use. He was not supporting adjustments. I didn't see that. What was the last, what was the last amount of fine, what's the correct word?
A civil penalty.
What was the last amount of the civil penalty?
So in 2015, there was a $1,000 civil penalty.
500.
And then none for the third, and then $1,000.
Pausing for others to comment.
I would comment that the potency of these courses would wane over a period of 5 years. So the recommendation appears to make sense, and if they want to continue this, they got to keep up with learning the materials and doing their job properly.
And we run into this a little bit. Is there a 14-hour sales comparison approach? Yeah.
Is there a 4-hour reconciliation?
No, you can combine the reconciliation into these other courses. The course is 30 hours for sales comparison that's available. There's not a 14-hour one that I know of.
Yeah, that was something I was going to ask about. I didn't know, just because I don't have any history with this board, if you could take 2 7-hour courses, if they were going to be different, or if that's duplicative. If it is duplicative, then I would say I would need to revise that to either a 7-hour, because I believe there's a 7-hour sales comparison, or a 30.
I think the sales comparison is what, 28?
28 with our exam.
Yeah, if that's the only thing available, then I would say that would need to be revised to the 30. 28.
I have great concerns here that their education has not helped this individual, evidently, nor has the civil penalties gotten his attention. Nothing seems to have gotten, I say his generically, nothing has gotten the individual's attention. So I would say that we need to do something that would get the attention. I'll pause a minute again to see if anybody else has something to say.
What is the max civil penalty?
The maximum civil penalty is up to $1,000 per violation.
That's one question I had. We have bullet points, but we have standard violations, several under each bullet point. So would it be a standard violation, or in this case, a bullet point?
So I'm like, are you talking about the standard rules? So I see that there are, so like there's a couple of them that cite standard rule 11B several times.
Right.
So I wouldn't, if you were to institute a civil penalty, I would have it per standard rule subpart and not have duplicate.
I think, I don't know, my interpretation of the expert's review is there's a lot of substance, but it seems like a lot of it is just maybe carelessness. And so he doesn't say that, you know, the reviewer doesn't say that there wasn't support for adjustments. They didn't develop a cost approach. It looks like in the highest and best use, there was just some lack of commentary. So to me, it seems like a report writing class might be best. So outside of that, I don't see a whole lot else. Like I said, there's a lot. So I'd make a motion for a report writing class and a $1,000 civil penalty.
I have a motion by Commissioner Mansfield. Second.
That for the 4th.
Yeah.
Yes. Have a second, or the motion will die without a second. Hearing none, is there another motion?
I make a motion that we assess a $2,000 civil penalty and require 14-hour report writing and 28-hour sales comparison.
Okay. Commissioner Atwood has submitted a motion. Do you want me to repeat the entire motion?
No, it's
Okay.
just, who made the
who's
motion?
it?
Do you want them to take the 2-hour test or no for sales comparison?
Yes, that would be 30 hours, and yes,
Okay.
we'll do that.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Atwood and a second by Commissioner Alexander. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously.
So that takes us to number 4, which is 2021-032-081. The complainant alleges that respondent mischaracterized the current market conditions in the local area in the comments written in the appraisal, and also alleges that the comment of very limited comparables is false, and a home adjacent to the subject property, which was sold in the last 3 months, was omitted. The complainant further alleges that describing the real estate market in their location as, quote, not significantly changing, end quote, is patently false. The respondent filed a response through their attorney and alleges that they were unable to find any homes adjacent to the property that sold within the prior 3 months to the appraisal as the complainant suggested. And the respondent states the complainant fails to identify which of the 6 comparables that were used were not comparable in fit, size, finish, or exterior quality. An expert review was conducted, and based on that review, there does not appear to be any violations of the Uniform Standard of Professional Appraisal Practice regarding respondent's work. Therefore, counsel recommended closing this matter.
Okay, we have a recommendation. Is there a discussion or a motion?
I'm getting confused on my pages here. I'm sorry. Give me a second.
I've got a question. I know on some of them there's the original licensing date. Do you know what that is for this individual?
We can look at, apologize.
I'll go ahead. I'll look that up if you guys want to. Just go ahead.
Further discussion? Wait for the license date.
So they were licensed in January of 2002.
License for 10 years. Violation found by the reviewer. So I'd make a motion to accept counsel's recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Mansfield and second by Commissioner Alexander. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign. Very good. We'll move on to number 5.
Number 5 is 2021-038-551. The complainant alleges with this report that the respondent completed an appraisal for them, but submitted it after the respondent's license expired. And I was able to check that with our licensing database, and that is not true. The respondent's license was not expired. They were active at the time. And then the complainant alleges that there were several mistakes in the appraisal. and the respondent states that they performed 2 revision requests, even though the complainant alleges they did not. And there was an expert review of this appraisal. And the opinion of the expert reviewer was that the appraisal is not credible as the conclusion is not supported by the presented data. Specifically, the appraiser failed to correctly employ the income approach. The report lot frontage differs from the plat provided, as well as a calculation of frontage from the listing brief, failure to adjust for lack of garages. The appraisal concludes a value significantly higher than that reported in the cost and sales comparison approaches and refers to an income approach, yet the income approach section was not completed. Information as to the lot sizes differs between appraisal and the plat and the listing information. The rental income for the subject property was not estimated or stated. The value conclusion set outside of the values indicated by the completed methods is misleading. The income approach is referred to, but is not completed, which I stated already. My recommendation is that we authorize a consent order and require 4 hours of income approach and 15 hours of report writing, continuing education to be completed within 180 days of the execution of the consent order, which would be in addition to the minimum for license renewal. And it looks like the first license date is November of 2014 for this respondent.
Very good, thank you. We have a council recommendation. Is there a motion or discussion?
Do we know if this is an income property to begin with? We don't have that information.
Same.
Look in the.
Michael, I'm sorry for the interruption. We can't hear everything everyone is saying. Can you make sure that you're speaking into your microphone, please?
Will do, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure when you're speaking, the red ring is showing. I want to know if it was an income property.
Yeah, is it a single-family house?
Okay.
And is it being used as an income property, as far as a rental house?
Sure. 1 second, I'm looking at
While they're looking that up, I'll comment on the site frontage difference. This could be a legitimate, it could be, I don't know, I don't have it in front of me. But if a residential appraisers often just use the measurements given in the tax records, which are not always the exact measurements. And so if you were to actually, say, for example, if it's an irregular lot and it says that it is, that, you know, the actual size of the lot could be different from what the 2 numbers that are given to us in the tax records, like 100 by 100. But the difference in size could be substantially different. So that could be an explanation here that's not fully explained for me. So I really don't have any way to judge whether the lot size is a problem or not. I'm not sure that it is.
So the property information states that it's a single family home, and in like the general information, it says intended uses for purchase.
Okay, thank you.
If that's the case, the income approach is not necessarily something that would need to be used here.
Right.
The only problem I have with it, I have two problems with it, is how did they appraise the property for $325 when the comps adjusted lower than that? And there was one other problem, wasn't there? Let's see. That's the one. There's another one. I'll have to look for it.
Says an income approach was referred to but not completed, but then later on there's a GRM.
It's confusing.
Sounds like there were some issues within the reconciliation of the report. Maybe it was left over, or, but to me that falls again under a report writing.
So is there a motion?
I make a motion that we authorize 15-hour report writing course only.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Atwood, a second by Commissioner Alexander. I have one question. Do we want to hit 15 hours or 14 hours?
I say 15.
Yeah.
15, the exam. 15.
So we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. We're ready for number 6.
6 is 2021-029-721. Okay, this was administratively opened. The respondent is a licensed certified general real estate appraiser, and their license expires on the 31st of this month, July 31st, 2021. On or about April 11th, 2019, respondent signed a voluntary revocation consent order for a separate jurisdiction, and this revocation became effective in May of 2019. The expert review that led to that consent order, that report findings included specific violations of USPAP, and the jurisdiction statutes were provided in this complaint. The subject properties and the underlying complaints against respondents span across several jurisdictions, including Tennessee. So the respondent is requesting that the commission allow their Tennessee license to expire, which would be at the end of this month, stating they no longer desire to work as a licensee here, but request that the commission not revoke their license because it would create complaints in different jurisdictions where respondent holds a license. And council recommends offering respondent a consent order authorizing voluntary surrender and or voluntary revocation of their license. Because although the license does expire at the end of this month, if we don't take disciplinary action and flag the licensure file, the respondent could move their license into an active status after satisfying all requirements for renewal in the future. Therefore, the recommendation is voluntary surrender and or voluntary revocation for violations of Tennessee Code Annotated 6239-326, and then also including a provision stating respondent is required to appear before the commission prior to any future renewal of their license if they were to apply again. And then Anna, are we saying voluntary surrender or voluntary revocation? Is there a difference?
So essentially the same. I view voluntary surrender same as revocation, so it has the same impact. It just is like a term, a phrase, which one you would prefer. But it would carry, a voluntary surrender would be a revocation.
So we need to pick one or the other.
Just for clarity purposes, probably revocation will be the clearest, as that one's like, uniformly accepted and recognized.
Very good. We have a council recommendation. Is there a motion or discussion?
I have a question. If they voluntarily surrender or revoke, that's not our decision, that's their decision. The word voluntary means they decided.
Right, so, at this point, because discipline, the matter has been presented before the commission, I really don't think a voluntary surrender would work here, but sometimes individuals, if there is something that's happened, they'll be like, I will voluntarily surrender my license, which is kind of what this individual has done, but he wants it to expire. So that's different from voluntary surrender. So if they don't want to go to a hearing, they would just be agreeing via consent order that their license is revoked. Yes.
So yeah, that's another part of doing it this way, is they would be admitting to those violations leading to this discipline, as opposed to an expiration where there's no admission on the record of wrongdoing.
Is there a time frame that they have to do that?
So when we send out a consent order to an individual, usually have 30 days to respond.
So if their license expires, will that still be in place?
So their license, I believe it expires at the end of this month. So once your license is expired, if an individual was to want, so like I looked at this matter and his license can expire, their license can expire, and then that would mean that they would have to renew their license, do CE and all of those kind of things, which is my concern, even though they state in the narrative that they're not going to continue to practice. I want to make sure that we have that option available. So an expiration doesn't prevent us from suspending a license or revoking a license. It's probably actually preferred, because what would happen is, let's say, okay, they decide to expire their license expired. 3 years later, they want to work, and then they would have to only do what was required to move their license back into active. We can't stop that motion, like that cycle happening. Does that?
But if in 3 years, if we choose this revocation and in 3 years they want to do that, they would have to come back before the commission and we would revisit all this history.
Correct. So that individual would have a prior disciplinary history from a state, federal, local occupational licensing body. It just happens to be you. If there's others, then you would make a determination at that time. Kind of, it would be similar to criminal convictions, where we have someone within that look back, and we would make a determination whether you want to proceed with licensure or not.
What if he runs this out, it expires, but he doesn't sign the consent order?
Then if the consent order is not signed, the matter would proceed to formal hearing. And if he doesn't appear at the formal hearing, it would be a default and we would move forward. Revocation.
Very good.
So I want to be sure we give everybody the benefit of the doubt until we can. So I have a couple of questions about the jurisdiction X. The person admitted to dishonesty, fraud, and misrepresentation. That's with the intent to substantially benefit the certificate holder. The individual admitted to that in jurisdiction X.
Yes.
And regarding those violations, it included properties in Tennessee.
Yeah,
the last sentence of first paragraph.
Yeah, it expanded over a lot of different properties. It wasn't just one state.
We seen this before?
This one,
Yes.
I don't.
Okay, it sounds familiar.
I know it sounds familiar, but I don't think it's
Okay.
this.
Okay. Okay. Because I was wondering if it was, I think it was conservation easements, the one before. Sounds very familiar.
I have a quick question. If the licensee had voluntarily surrendered the license before, you'll still open an administrative case, correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I'm just wondering if the licensee had surrendered their license before it came up here, you would still open an administrative case based on the other jurisdiction, correct?
Well,
So at that point, if they have voluntarily surrendered their license, to me, when that is done, that means that their license ceases to exist. I still think at that point we would open a complaint, but it would be that the person has voluntarily surrendered their license. So at that point, adding more discipline probably would make sense.
So we've had some discussion. Is there a motion?
I move we accept the council recommendation.
Dr. Go ahead.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jane, a second by Commissioner Mansfield. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. We'll move on to number 7.
Number 7, 2021-034-841. The complainant alleges that the appraiser's report caused them to lose a buyer due to it being too low. Further alleges that respondent used comparables that were not of the same quality as their home. The complainant listed comparables that their realtor used and stated those were much closer to their home than the comparables used by respondent. The respondent filed a response stating that comparables used in the report are most similar to the subject and recently sold. The respondent states all of the upgrades made by the complainant were taken into consideration because that was another allegation the complainant made, that they did not take upgrades into consideration in the report. The respondent further alleges that the complainant's real estate agent was pressuring them to use higher sales and was trying to impact their independence as an appraiser. And then lastly, the respondent alleges the buyers were not lost due to the appraisal, as the appraisal was not actually requested by the buyer, but rather by a financial institution. An expert review was conducted, and the expert did find violations. Specifically, the property value trend is reported to be stable. However, verification of data is beyond this, or I guess the verification of that was beyond the scope for this expert. But the expert observed that there were no missing checkboxes or blank fields with missing commentary. The quality of construction and whether it is superior to the neighborhood cannot be verified by the reviewer. In addition, since subject is not new construction, the upgrades included in the original base prices is no longer relevant. Site value is not supported. There's no summary of the land sales utilized for the determination of the site value. There's the income approach was not developed. The comments in the scope of work and in the income approach section state it's not applicable, but the comments do not say why it is not applicable as required by USPAP. Therefore, council recommends a consent order, authorizing a consent order requiring 4 hours of general report writing continuing education Let me know if that does not exist, and we can revise that, and for that to be completed within 180 days of execution of the consent order, in addition to the minimum CE for license renewal.
Thank you. We have council recommendation. Is there a motion or discussion?
Any history?
So there was a 2016 consent order that the respondent had signed for failing to report mold and structural issues, which led to a 7-hour FHA course to be completed. And that was the only discipline. And I guess they were, let me see when they were first licensed, because that would help you know how long they've gone without any other complaints. They have been licensed since 2001 with just the 2016 consent order.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion?
I only see one issue here, if I'm not misreading. There's no support for the site value. The rest of them seem to be well, I can't say unimportant, but unsubstantiated. So, since the respondent has a previous history of violation, I would recommend that we send an order of $500 and require a 15-hour site and cost approach course. Though the site course goes with a cost approach course. They go together, so you have to do it, but that would be 15 hours.
That includes a test, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's in addition to the
In addition to a $500 civil penalty.
We have a motion by Commissioner Atwood. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Second by Commissioner Jane. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Number 8.
Okay, so this takes us to our re-presentations, and number 8 has been brought to you before. The number is 2019-090-411. And the only new information here is that the respondent's license has expired and the respondent's no longer practicing. They've never signed the consent order, so council's recommendation is to close and flag this matter, which would mean if in the future they try to renew their license, this can be reopened.
Thank you. We have a council recommendation. Is there a motion or discussion?
if their license is not, it's expired, that's really all we can do at this point, right?
I mean, the only other option is to have a formal hearing and pursue getting the original discipline that was recommended, but we usually don't pursue a formal hearing when somebody's license is expired and there's been no response, but that is up to the commission.
I'll make a motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Mansfield, second by Commissioner Alexander. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Moving on to number 9.
9 is 2020-041-821. And this matter was originally, I guess, not presented to the commission because there was no disciplinary history, and a conditional dismissal was submitted to the respondent with a 7-hour online sales comparison approach, 8 hours highest and best use, and that was the extent of the discipline. And the respondent stated they didn't receive that, so then it was presented to the commission, and a consent order was authorized by the commission. And then the respondent did get that consent order and hired an attorney, and the attorney has reached out to counsel, to prior counsel, and asked if the conditional dismissal would still be available, then they would be willing to sign that and take that coursework. So I wanted to present that to you to allow you to make that decision if we can still offer that conditional dismissal.
When that was sent, was it sent certified mail? I mean, is there documentation that they definitely did not receive it?
I don't know offhand.
What's the normal process for sending that information out?
Normally it is certified mail, regular and certified mail. Anna is looking into that.
Question in the meantime, they don't receive any other communication by electronic means or emails or on their other records?
That's something else that.
It's also right when COVID started really hitting, where there was all kind of communication. I
will tell you, based on all the other programs I've worked with, mail was a really big problem. Of course, you know, you can't say that about email, but we had a lot of issues with people not getting their mail, us not knowing if they got it, not getting the green cards back. I'm still getting green cards to this day from things I sent out a year and a half ago.
I looked at the certified mailing number that was attached to the conditional dismissal, and I tracked it on USPS, and there's nothing here that says it's been delivered.
Very good.
It says it's in transit.
And I've had a lot of things happen that way, I can say. More than I like to admit. It's been really frustrating.
Very good. Thank you. So we have a council recommendation. Further discussion or a motion?
I move to accept the prior commission decision.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Alexander, second by Commissioner Jane. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Moving on to number 10.
Okay, number 10. This is quite an old matter that has been presented to you a couple times by prior counsel. The number is 2017-081-031. Basically, this matter has been originally presented to you, and the discipline was approved to be, I think, 30 hours of general highest and best use and 30 hours of report writing, considering the violations, of course. And the respondent hired an attorney, had their own expert review. I believe it was resubmitted to you, and prior counsel recommended to dismiss and close it. And the commission voted to reinstate their original recommendation. And I can only take an educated guess that prior counsel decided to have an additional expert review that we just received in June, because the respondent is just being just, does not want to sign this consent order and strongly disagrees with the idea that there are violations that were committed and the disciplines being offered. So what I'm presenting to you today is just purely this last expert review and what their findings are, just because I want you to hear about it. And if you want to discuss it, then I think that would be appropriate. Basically, the most recent expert found, well, first, they were only asked to focus on zoning site sections and assumptions made in these sections as they pertain to the indicated market value, because that's what is most relatable to the violations. And the expert concluded that the site description section did not contain sufficient information to describe the subject's two site shapes adequately. The zoning section did not contain sufficient detailed information to describe the subject's two sites zones adequately. The sales comparison approach did not discuss the selected of the 25 commercial acres, limited analysis and reconciliation of the listed sales. And in general, it's the expert's opinion, the information in the sections of the report reviewed are generally technically complete, but were considered inadequate, which in some cases affected the credibility of the section. And I believe the original allegation was that this property was highly overvalued, and there was only 6 acres zoned for commercial use, but the respondent allocated 25 acres. So that's why we have this third expert focus on that. So I know this has come before you a few times, and I feel, you're obviously the experts in this. I don't see that this changes anything, but I wanted to let you make that decision.
I was going to point out the second review is consistent with the first one.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
The respondent continues to try to explain zoning, which should have already been explained when they turned the report in. It shouldn't have taken months for the respondent to figure out what zoning was available. Should have been done before turning the report in. And the issue is not really zoning. It is zoning, but the real issue, zoning is a sign of the real problem. And the real problem is did not develop highest and best use properly. I think that still stands. Therefore, my motion is to maintain what we've already decided.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Commissioner Atwood, second by Commissioner Alexander. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
And this is our last represent. Number 11 is 2020083561. And we have a signed consent order on this matter already. The only issue that I wanted to bring to your attention and get some advice on is the respondent states that, well, first, they are required to do a 15-hour sales comparison course and a 15-hour report writing. I know there's a 15-hour report writing course, so that's not the issue, but they are stating they cannot find a 15-hour sales comparison course and that they're only offered in 7-hour increments. So they're not sure how to complete this 15 hours requirement. And I tried to work this out before bringing it to you, but I couldn't find a 15-hour either.
If it's not 15, they can take something more just to cover the 15.
So, and that, I wanted to make sure that that is what, before I tell them they need to take, because I think it would be double, right? I mean, a 30 is probably what they need to take. But that's
28 plus 2 hours for exam. Did we require the exam? Mm-hmm. I think we should require.
Yeah. Do we require the 28 or the 30 with the exam?
Well, I don't think we require. We told them 15, and right. So they need 15. If they get 20,
yeah.
Oh, shucks.
Okay. So, and that leads me to my next question. Can they use anything over 15 towards their requirement for renewal.
I think we've had that come up before. I'm trying to remember how we handled that. That's accounting for you all as far as to figure that out.
Well, the reason that we brought that up is because I think it was 15 hours. 15 hours, and that was what was recommended at the last meeting, and we have a signed consent order for that. And so now we realize there aren't 15-hour courses. So it's like you said, if you wanted the amount to be 15 and that's what is required to them for their discipline, I think it would be fair for the other 15 to count towards their continuing education, because now essentially their requirement has doubled. And that's not what they agreed to when they signed it.
I would agree that, and I looked up, there's a sales comparison class, the end of September, you know, and it's 30 hours. And as long as they take the exam.
Okay, sure. We'll make sure that any of the other hours are applied to their CE.
Do we need a vote on that, or is that just clarification?
Let's vote on it.
Okay.
To be safe.
Very good. Is there, I could go ahead and make a motion as a chairman, can I? Okay, I'll move that in a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Garrison, second by Commissioner Mansfield. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That wraps us up, doesn't it?
It does. Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
patience.
Thank you. We'll move on to experience.
I think, according to the
No, we have one more thing, yeah.
the requested Louisiana FTC discussion that was brought up at the last meeting.
So I guess I've been working with one of our interns this summer. Her name is Caitlin. She's unable to be here today, but I believe she's online. And I had her do some research regarding the FTC matter, and I wanted to know what exactly, did you want to know what the conclusions of the consent order state, or what information we're looking for in the continuation of the conversation?
I think that was brought up by a commissioner that's not here this morning.
Okay. Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Correct. Okay, so I can provide general information about what the consent order states, or if you want to roll that until October, when Mr. Bennett comes back, you just let me know.
Why don't we roll that over? There's really nothing that applies to Tennessee, from what I saw.
Yeah, so like the conclusion is we haven't seen it kind of apply anywhere else. This is specific for Louisiana, and it's specific to like compensation for AMC appraisal services. So there isn't like a strict scrutiny. So it's like not directly applied to us. I don't think we're going to have that issue. We haven't seen that issue. It's just something to be aware of in the future.
Now, there was a time frame where different state boards was looking at reasonable and customary fees coming out of AMCs. Louisiana got out in front. We discussed it. I remember discussing it as a board. We said the free market will take care of it, and left it at that.
Yeah, so it doesn't really apply to this board directly. So what I'll just do is I'll reach out to Mr. Bennett and ask him if he has any specific questions for me.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you. Now I think we're ready for experience.
Just to be clear, we're not going to table that. We're going to take that off pending the discussion there.
Right.
Okay.
If there's something in her conversation with him that we need to handle, we can pick it back up in November.
Okay, I'll make a note. Thank you.
I think we have a report on experience. I'm jumping over to it. Have you all found it?
Should be page 7. It's on the back side of the previous meeting minutes adjournment page.
I had an interview, but it is not listed on here.
Okay, which one did you have?
And Travis McMaster.
The carryover, correct? Okay.
Was it an approval?
All right, we'll make sure and have the minutes for this meeting reflect that.
We want to go down through each one and sort of do them as a group.
I think, yeah. I mean, unless there's specific ones that require discussion, you could potentially vote out a number of them on block.
Very good. On mine, there's 2 that were open, and I recommend both of them. That's Andrew Hayes and Crystal Stewart. Commissioner Atwood, you have 2 that are open.
My recommendation is for Seth Stouter and Gene Carmen only. The other 2 are pending.
Okay. So we will remove those for this morning. Commissioner Mansfield, all yours is good. Yep. Did you have any extras?
No, just the 3.
Very good, thank you. And we have Commissioner Alexander's. So with the exclusion of the 2 by Commissioner Atwood, is there a motion to accept?
Move to accept.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Alexander and a second by Commissioner Hasten. Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just
yes.
Because we have some folks who are audio only, I would like to read the names of the applicants. Those are up for approval applicants: Holliday, Hayes, Stewart, Stouter, Carmen, Davis, Gagliano, Chatham, and McMasters.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. We'll move to the education. Commissioner Jane.
Yes, staff, commission staff, Mr. Caleb Darnell had worked with the course providers who submitted a number of courses and a number of instructors to be approved by the commission. And wherever appropriate, I had asked him to request additional materials to ensure that the quality of the courses would be acceptable. And after review of all the materials I've listed in the education report, all of the courses that I recommend for approval, as well as instructors that are recommended for approval.
You make that in a motion? The approval.
So I moved that all of the courses listed in the education report and the instructors listed on the education report be approved.
Very good. I have a motion by Commissioner Jane. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. By Commissioner Mansfield. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Thank you. We'll move into the director's report.
Thank you. Thank you. The education report allowed me to get all of this mess in order over here. So I've now got all the pages where they need to be. First thing on my list is the financial statements, which are through May of 2021. The only things I think that are abnormal here that would draw your attention are the higher revenue, licensing revenue numbers for March, April, and May. Those are panel transactions, and they are, just kind of once a year deals. So last year, historically, these were the same 3 months that were inflated as well. So everything else should look in order and normal to you all, but are there any questions? Okay. The other item, just to close out the loop on this financial statement, is you will notice that, and a lot of this I believe has to do with last year, but the reserves are up to $3.1 million and appear to be climbing. So financially, this commission is in good shape.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you. And the next item I have on my for my report is actually discussion that I would like to hear from you all about regarding virtual and synchronous coursework. You'll notice that in your packet of meeting materials, you received an email conversation beginning with Mary Withers Pitts and involving members of staff and myself, as well as Anna. So what we're asking is specifically about the 12/31 deadline for expiration date of acceptance of virtual CE. Would like to know if you all would like to continue that, to move it forward in terms of accepting virtual and online CE in perpetuity, or if we're going to let that 12/31 deadline come and go.
I've got a question on that. We had a rulemaking hearing where we took everything online and synchronous. Wouldn't that goes into effect in August, is that right? Would that cover us then, that this wouldn't be an issue?
That's not going to cover CE.
Okay.
Those rules were for qualifying education.
I thought we changed CE to 100%.
No.
We didn't?
It was just for
Okay.
qualifying education.
Okay.
And those rules will be presented before the General Assembly on Wednesday. And then I believe they go into effect in the first or second week of August. So continuing education is not included in that.
I thought for sure we went 100% across the board.
I don't recall that.
Okay. Okay. So it's still 50% CE.
Right. So at that time, we were just looking at qualifying education courses. And then I think the extension essentially from the ASC and AQB ends in December of 2021. So if we want to proceed with continuing education to be all able to take via distance education, I can draft rules for you for review at the October meeting.
November.
Yeah, that month too.
So the AQB ruling is that it will expire in December.
That was what it was at the last meeting, 12/31/2021. I will double check.
I think that's still the case.
I don't think it's been extended.
No.
But yeah, so.
Is there a chance it will be, do we know, or are they pretty well set in concrete at this point?
I haven't heard any additional information. Honestly, that's probably something that they'll talk about at Aero in October, but I don't have any indication that it's going to be extended. I think everything, and even if I did, things change like very quickly. So if that's something that the commission does want to pursue on a permanent basis, I would recommend amending rules to do that. But if you want to wait and see what ASC and AQB decide, we can do that as well. But either way, I can have a set of rules drafted for consideration. So if you decide that is something you want to take up, then we can talk about it in October, November, or October, November, whenever the next meeting is. And then that would give us at least time to proceed with that to go to our hearing so we could get things moving quicker.
It would not be possible to have that in place by the end of December.
No.
Gap.
Now, there'll be a gap of hopefully like only a couple of months. So, yeah.
A way to maybe clear that up on the website with that date?
With the date,
Mm-hmm.
If that's something that you want us to add, or if that's a communication that you want us to send out to licensees, we can do that as well, just to make sure that that communication is given to everyone so they know that while this is something that's going to be considered, there'll probably be like a 2 or 3 month lapse. So if their license is going to expire at that time, they would need to make make certain decisions regarding in-person versus virtual distance education.
Definitely need some
Okay.
a reminder that rule will sunset.
Now we can do that. I'll draft a letter, work with Michael to send out to licensees, letting them know about that. And then if we hear, and we'll let, I'll put in the letter that will let everyone know as soon as possible if it's been extended.
Go ahead.
If you go ahead and draft up the information, would it be beneficial to have it drafted up already? So if we did vote or there was a...
Right, that's what I was saying is I'll have the rules drafted so it can be reviewed and looked at in October. And then you'll just make the decision at that time if you want to proceed with changing all of the continuing education to be permitted distance education.
We would have a rulemaking hearing in January.
Yes, correct.
Some quick questions and discussion on this. So we're moving from 100% face-to-face to 100% online, or was it 50-50 before?
So for qualifying education purposes, only 75 hours were permitted to be taken via distance education. And so with this rule change, it'll be 100% that can be taken via distance education. That doesn't mean that's the only way you can take the course. It's just available there if you want to. So people can still take in-person courses, but also distance education.
And I see a lot of value in hybrid, so there should be some interaction of the appraisers in person with the providers and continuing education. So this will take away, so what we are discussing here might completely remove that, right? It's 100% online, and the appraiser may not see the face of another appraiser in a way. So for exchange of ideas within the industry.
Yeah, our last rulemaking hearing, and really COVID sort of pushed us into, in the past, we had 75 hours, 79 hours, including the supervisory, could be taken online. The balance had to be in person. The last rulemaking hearing, we made all qualifying ed available online. Now we're 50% CE, and the question is, do we move forward?
Michael, I apologize. We could not hear anything that was being said.
I was lighting up.
Okay, Laura, what was, Mr. Garrison's microphone appeared to be on and working. What was the last thing you heard?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. He was talking and we could hear him perfectly, and just all of a sudden it went completely blank. I thought that maybe you had muted accidentally.
Okay, so let's just assume it was towards the end of what you were just saying.
Yes.
Right at the end. I was saying we went 100% qualifying ed, and we're 50% CE. So I guess my thoughts, I think we sort of move forward. If we're doing 100% on qualifying ed, CE needs to be right there. And I totally agree with you on the hybrid. It's important. I think COVID has shown that it can be possible to do it online, but the interaction, there's better education, better retention.
But our qualifying education is not strictly online. It is synchronous live instruction online, but not a straight online class, correct?
So I was actually just looking at this. Distance education courses intended for use as qualifying education are required, a written closed book or final examination. There's not a specific requirement that it has to be synchronous. The definition of distance education in the rules states instruction does not take place in a traditional classroom setting, but through other media or non-conventional methods in which the teacher and student are separated by distance and sometimes by time, and the course provides interaction. I'm not sure exactly how, if someone else could give me insight on how Appraiser education goes. Do you have many asynchronous qualifying education courses, meaning those that you can take at any time?
Or is true online?
Yes, like strictly online.
3 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, where you're separated by time, not by distance.
Asynchronous is what we've already approved for all qualifying education. Synchronous expires in December, is my understanding.
Right.
And so those are two different things.
So,
yeah, but I thought we included them all.
So for qualifying education.
No, we did not.
Qualifying education. For qualifying education, it's going to be synchronous and asynchronous, and that goes into effect in August.
Oh, we did approve synchronous?
Yeah.
Forever.
There's not a differentiation in the rules for distance education.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I was asking if it was common for you to take an asynchronous qualifying education course. Are those offered?
There are some out there.
Okay, but majority of them are not asynchronous?
I'm trying to think of other providers.
Caleb, is this something you might be able to help us with?
Yes, we are currently getting some applications for asynchronous QE, so it's just steadily coming in right now.
Yeah. I think it's going to be something we see more of.
Right, but I'll just, to be clear, there is no differentiation between synchronous and asynchronous in the rules that go into effect in August.
Yeah.
So 100% of QE, QE can be taken synchronous or asynchronous. But right now, in terms of CE, still 15% or 50% has to be taken. Okay.
50-50.
I see that as a potential problem in terms of maintaining the quality of experiences or best practices in the industry if everything is asynchronously taken by the appraisers, and who knows who takes it if there's no monitoring of that. So my recommendation is to discuss this further to make sure that we are not approving something which can significantly lower the quality of appraisals going forward.
Unfortunately, we've taken that leap, and this has been a topic of discussion for probably 10 years, and COVID pushed us over the hump.
Right, and I've seen some very good online courses which use online monitoring and interaction, and those are, I think, almost as good as in face-to-face. But we are also talking about completely asynchronous, where it is impossible to see who took the course.
So
and that's what we battled. Yes.
Help me understand what expires in December.
Synchronous or asynchronous, no, it's synchronous courses for continuing education expire in December. So that only applies to jurisdictions like us that don't, that you cannot complete all of your education online. So I understand what you're saying, Dr. Jane, about the component. I want to, when between now and the next meeting, I'm going to go look at the standards. I haven't seen differentiation between synchronous versus asynchronous. I know that's something that I'm also working on for one of my other programs. But I'll get a feel and ask some other additional jurisdictions if they have delineated those two and what, if that's possible. And that'll just be information that I come back and bring to the meeting in October when we have the full discussion.
Yes, and I do have some personal experiences of how these courses are run in online formats. And there is a day and night difference between fully asynchronous versus where the appraiser or whoever is taking whatever course in other fields is required to present their ID and then have their cameras on. And those kind of requirements often are not imposed in the fully asynchronous. So there is quite a bit of difference. And I don't see much point in clubbing them together and assuming that they are the same.
Okay.
Thank you for your insight.
I'm still confused, so just help me understand. The AQB has approved synchronous for QE
and CE through the end of 2021.
What happens to QE with the AQB after December?
It goes back to the requirements based on the state. So for us,
for the state, okay.
Yes. So for us, that would mean if this rule would didn't exist, we would only be permitting 75 hours to be taken via distance education.
Yeah, what they approved is if the class was approved for an in-person class, it could also be offered synchronous. So they didn't have to go through additional approval to get it approved to do it synchronous. Now, after the first of the year, they would have to get approval for it to be synchronous. Is that right?
Correct. Okay, no, it's just, so all courses right now are allowed to be taken via synchronous education. At the end of December, January 1st, 2022, that goes away and it goes back to the rules and statutes of each of the jurisdictions.
Which in our case is 50% online.
Right, so for CE, it'll be 50-50, but for QE, since the rule will go in effect into August, it'll be 100%. So we're just
100% what?
100% of qualifying education courses with this new rule change will be permitted to take. You can take it on distance education. So that can be synchronous or asynchronous. So I think the conversation that we're going to be having in October is if we want, or if it's even possible to state that if the distance education, like if we were to go to 100%, whether we could make a difference between synchronous versus asynchronous. So that way, the in-person courses where you're in your seats would just be you taking a Zoom course instead. So you would still have that teacher interaction. Does that answer your question?
And just so I can add, to give you an example, you know, the ASC has virtual guidelines in place for things like attendance that they use as accountability. So all of those are covered from the ASC level.
So
It's just that I did not know that's what we passed. I mean, really, I thought we only approved asynchronous. I didn't know we also approved synchronous for QE.
yeah, and that was one thing that I wanted to make.
Okay, well, I voted for it, so I guess I was right.
So like to just for the rules, so before we had a rulemaking hearing if we go all the way back to 2018. And then nothing happened. Then I came back in January of 2019 with the suggestions from the commission. And so at that meeting, it was recommended that the 15-hour use PAP course, the 30-hour appraisal principles, and 30-hour appraisal practice or procedures, all those 3 courses were permitted to be taken via distance education. So then that was passed and that was it. And then we had a pandemic. And so when we came back last year, we brought up the issue of wanting to permit distance education for all of QE. So essentially what happened is that line that had those 3 courses that I added is being deleted again. So we did vote that all of the courses for QE and CE would be via distance education. And since our statutes and our rules do not differentiate from asynchronous versus synchronous, both of those are permitted.
May I have a request for council to prepare a summary of I understand that the pandemic required special handling. That's a public safety concern and a lot of things had to be approved in a rush. But going forward, I think it's best for us to fully understand for all members of the commission what exactly is the status which will be in place without any action from the 1st of next year. Versus if we extend certain things, how will it look like going forward for the appraisers, their QE as well as their CE? Well, how much can be taken online and how much of it could be synchronous versus asynchronous? What I understand from your last statement is that there's no differentiation between the two.
Right.
And I'm a little uncomfortable with that, but that's okay. So if you can just give us a tabular summary so that whatever the commission is approving would be clear to not only the commission, but to the members of the public as well. Thank you.
So this discussion is happening at our next meeting.
I think it
okay.
probably be a good thing. Yeah.
That time, I'll work with everybody. I'll work with Michael, Caleb. I'll check in with our representative from the ASC, Claire, and see what's kind of going on in different jurisdictions, and I'll have that information for you. I do know that the pandemic, because of it, has changed how courses are going to be presented moving forward. I know that a lot of individuals are going to be submitting both asynchronous and synchronous courses. We just need to know how that's going to impact our licensees only for continuing education.
Yeah, up until that point, last year. I think Tennessee was one of 5 or 6 states that still required in-person classes. All the other states, it was 100% online.
Right. Tennessee is in the minority.
Mm-hmm. Right. Very good. Does that cover everything on that one that we're going to?
One question from me regarding this. Would you prefer that I get a notice out prior to the October, early November discussion?
Yes, I think regardless, there's going to be a gap. So I would, and how it would be worded is that the AQB requirement will sunset December 31st.
We can make that happen.
And that puts it on them, and then we'll deal with what we need to deal with in Tennessee.
I'm good to go.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to old business.
Yeah, the Perea discussion continuation. As you'll note in last meeting's minutes, I told you I would leave this on here until you told me to take it off. So it's on here so that you all can continue that discussion.
At some point, we're going to have to, and Anna, this may be, if we end up doing a rulemaking hearing, we may want to piggyback this so we're not doing multiple, but maybe include Perea in that rulemaking hearing. And from my understanding, the only thing that we need to decide on is how much that will count towards experience.
So it would be that we are incorporating that into the experience as permitted, and then we would be, I'm seeing it kind of as a new section for the rules, and then we would make the different, how we're going to do it, what we're going to do, and we'll do it that way. I can draft some of those as well. I'll look at that. I'll look if I can find some other information from other neighboring jurisdictions, how they're doing it. And then we can definitely have that to happen. I guess I can wait till October, but in the interim between these meetings, be thinking whether you want that to be in one package or 2 separate packages. Whether you want the Perea changes and the distance education, if that decides to happen, to be in one package together. The reason I'm saying that is we might not have an issue with continuing education. We don't know. But if Perea is included in that and for some reason we need to yank the rules, it's going to lump those 2 together. So my recommendation is to separate them, but we can make a final decision in October. November.
I like the idea of separating them, but the timing aspect, we can cover them and they will still roll.
I'll draft them in 2 separate packages, and I'll bring that information to you guys. And I will make sure that the red line, which is the document that I'll give you, all is sent out a little bit earlier so you have more time to review the rules since it's going to be so new.
Very good. Thank you.
We want to have a brief discussion on the percentage, just to get that conversation started.
Would that help you in drafting those?
Sure, it can, or I was just going to leave blanks and then we could fill it in. But if you want to talk about it now and get some ideas, I can base it off of that. But nothing that I like pre-draft beforehand. We can make changes during the next meeting. And if there's something in the interim, you decide that today you want it to be different next meeting.
Right.
So based on the minutes from last time, there were only 5 states that had made decisions. But if you're going to investigate them, we may have more information on more states.
Right. I think at the last meeting, the issue is I don't think we have any kind of Perea program at that point. And so it was out there, but if you don't have a program, what are you going to implement if it doesn't exist? They'll probably, we'll have an update for it. If you have some like general discussion now, kind of what you're thinking about, how you want to use it, that'll be, definitely be beneficial.
Well, I read the information on the Foundation's website this morning, and for a license and certified residential, we could give 100% credit, according to that website. General, however, it didn't give an amount. It said partial, which means you cannot give 100% credit for a general license, but it didn't say how much you could give. It just said partial. So there could be 100% credit given for the residential license and the certified residential. And just to throw this out, the only problem I would have with that is it does not provide geographical competence when you're doing it that way. If we gave 100%, they would not have geographical competence. Other than that, I kind of like it. But
it would be a similar discussion as far as online versus synchronous. You know, getting some practical experience. But I think that's something we can discuss at one time in November at our November meeting. And hopefully we have some other states to follow. And I don't think there's a time crunch on it because I don't know of a provider that has brought one to the table yet. And we may find something out at Aero that one's in the oven.
Like, this is something that is kind of a longer term goal. Definitely something we'll have to consider, but there are a couple of missing pieces in order to like fully implement that at this time.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to new business, the independent appraiser reviews. Going back, I think it's roughly about 2018, this was a topic of discussion. It sort of got put back on the back burner when we had to deal with the appraisal waiver. But this is something that has been, I don't think, well communicated and miscommunicated over a period of time in Tennessee. I think there was a period of time we had a director that actually said you did not have to be licensed in the state of Tennessee to do appraisal reviews. However, if you look at the rules and if you look at the laws, that's hard to come to that conclusion. In 2018, Sarah Matthews was our attorney. I sent Anna and Michael email correspondence that we had, but as we're moving forward, there are more appraisal reviews that are occurring today than what there was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. As we move forward with the hot real estate market, and we all know it's a matter of when, not a matter of if it hits the fan. We need to have clarity for if you have to have a license in Tennessee to do appraisal reviews. Here's an example, and I've got several examples, but I've provided litigation support for an attorney. This was on a residential property. The appraiser submitted a report. The AMC out of California reviewed that report. They asked him to change some comparables. In doing so, the value changed. Because the value changed, the sale didn't go through and now there's pending civil litigation against the appraiser because of that issue. If there was a complaint filed against the review appraiser, we couldn't do anything here in Tennessee because of that big question. And I think there's a lot of reviews being done by non-licensed appraisers in Tennessee. And I think we need to be clear, and this is one of those things where we need to communicate to the masses that to do independent reviews, you have to hold a license in the state of Tennessee, an appraiser license. You have a chance to look at that, Anna, and get your thoughts on.
So I had a chance to look at it, but like you said in the emails and based on the conversation, there's a little bit of gray area how things are written. And so my recommendation, you're probably not going to like this, is if you give me some additional time to look at it, and then I'll have a clearer answer for you at the next meeting. I'd also, during that, I'll be working with Michael and looking at, real cases, case law, possibly consult with one of the attorney generals, assistant attorney generals that looks at our things there to see if they have an opinion. So because because this is important and we want to make sure that we get it right and communicate that effectively, I'd like some extra time to look at that, if that's okay.
A couple things to add with that.
Yeah.
In USPAP, Standards 3 covers review appraisals. In situations, if a reviewer is reviewing an appraisal report and they have a different opinion of value, now they shift to Standards 1, and that's part of valuation. So it's difficult to review a report unless you're doing a checklist, but in the definition of in the definition for a review appraiser, even a USPAP checklist would require a license.
So review assignment is defined, it says means an analysis, opinion, or conclusion prepared by a real estate appraiser that forms an opinion as to the adequacy and appropriateness of a valuation appraisal or an analysis assignment. And then that would kick us back to what an analysis assignment is defined as.
That's the state definition?
That is the definition that is in law, and these are modeled off of our statutes, get audited by the appraisal subcommittee. Never had an issue with that one. Pretty sure that's the same across the board.
But if the person conducting the review wasn't a licensed appraiser, I think that's what Commissioner Garrison is talking about. And also think that it would be very helpful to have Commissioner Bennett here because all commercial appraisal reports, I'm pretty sure, have to be reviewed by interagency guidelines. But the issue is going to be with the appraisal management companies, most of them who are located out of state, and I would venture to say most of them don't have a licensed appraiser on staff.
But there's no exemption. And the exemption on the appraisal side is if they work for a lender, and an AMC is independent. And that's something that when this topic came up before, we were in the process of working on the AMC law. And So I think that's something, and it's going to happen probably more so on the residential side, where they kick back and they push back on value, and that's the issue. If they push on value, that is a change that they are forming an opinion of value, and now it shifts over to standards 1. And I think we need to be clear on this, and it's more so laying the groundwork for when the real estate market drops off, because that's when we're going to see more complaints, we're going to see more issues, and and I think you're going to see more cases come against review appraisers because of the requirement of having to get appraisals reviewed.
Right, that even though it's not specific to appraisers, when I attended the Aero Conference for real estate agents, the conversation about the market and new complaints being generated was a topic of discussion. So we're all kind of bracing for that to happen. So I think it would be a really good idea if we got that guidance out to individuals. But I also want you all to know, even if we provide guidance that says, yes, it's A, B, or C, that doesn't preclude a consumer or an individual to file a complaint. So it's not going to be, we're going to review it the same kind of way. We can't just bar someone from filing a complaint. Does that make sense? Like, for example, if we get complaints related to value, those complaints are drafted by the legal report and then brought to you. They're not sent out to expert reviewers because we don't have jurisdiction over those matters. So I'm just saying, even if we clarify it, people can still ask that question. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. There's a difference in the definition of appraisal review that you just read and USPAP's definition. Appraisal review, by defined in USPAP, is to develop an opinion of the quality of another appraiser's work. So by that definition, there is no property being reviewed. Commissioner Garrison said we review a property. We're not reviewing a property under USPAP definition. We're reviewing the work of an appraiser. So that property can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in a certain state. However, once they cross the line and they develop an opinion of value of that property, he is correct. They have now performed an appraisal service, and they should have a license in the state in which they are appraising to be able to do that. And to tell someone to select certain comps and to deselect other comps is a valuation issue. It's not a review issue. They have given an opinion of value at that point. Comp selection is a part of valuation, not review. So yes, he would be correct in that. However, if all we're doing is doing a review of the quality of another individual's work without giving an opinion of value, I don't see under USPAP how we have any jurisdiction to require them to be licensed in our state. But once they start giving an opinion of value, we do have and in the case that you just said, we do have jurisdiction over the guy in California because he just did an appraisal in Tennessee and he doesn't have a license.
There are other states that require you to have a license to do review work.
We might not require that, but it's not a USPAP. I don't think it's a USPAP requirement.
Well, USPAP doesn't cover licensing.
Correct.
And I contend if we're going to accept USPAP as our standards, review work falls under the standards, therefore you ought to be licensed.
That's the gray area she was talking about.
Can I ask a question? Just still like a general knowledge question. So what I'm understanding from you all. If it's looking at the appraisal and it's just looking at that and it's not making a determination regarding value, then you're not necessarily permitted to have a Tennessee license for that, right? If it doesn't address.
That's the issue. It's not clear. We have review appraiser as a definition, and really when we looked at it before, it came back to, and I was trying to pull up my notes because I didn't have them on the remarkable. It came back to just the tweaking of words. Mm-hmm. And I don't, and back when a lot of that was defined, fewer reports were reviewed. And most of them, I would say back early 90s, the vast majority of it was done in-house by lenders. And so it wasn't an issue. And now, and really since 2010, since Dodd-Frank and interagency guidelines, there is more reviews that are occurring. And I think it's something that we need to clear up. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to, we won't have any jurisdiction over someone in California when they review an appraisal report that was performed on a property in Tennessee.
Right. I guess my question in an actual practice setting, if an individual was to do a review and then that individual looks at the comps and decides which ones they want to include or not include, do they stop the review at that time? Or do they just carry on and we're looking to see if that's unlicensed activity?
It's carrying on, and it's carrying on. The thing is that review appraiser may not have the qualifications to truly review the report.
And tell them which comps. The moment somebody tells an appraiser, these are the comps you need to use and those you need to take those out, they are exhibiting a competence or a lack of competence. Are they competent to make that decision? So if they're in California, never been to Tennessee, and they don't know anything about those comps, they're not competent to make that decision. And of course, the appraiser who listens to them and changes it and then signs a report is responsible because they signed the report. And
I was just wondering if, like, during that process, they're like, oh, no, this needs to go to somebody from the actual state, or is it?
Yeah, that should happen.
That should happen.
That should happen.
But we're looking to see if it doesn't happen and the person signs it, whether that's going to be considered unlicensed activity, because they need a license from Tennessee to do that.
To simply say you need to change these comps. They've made a standard 1 and a standard 2. They've made a standard 1 decision. Yes. It comes under our jurisdiction at that point.
So if it's outside of standard 3, then it would fall under our jurisdiction and we would be looking at it compared to our rules and statutes.
That's correct, and we don't need any changes to do that.
Okay.
So what you just said, standard 3 is exempt in the state of Tennessee to hold a license.
That's what you said.
That's what I said.
No, that's what he said.
That's what
I contend because standard 3 is part of USPAP, you ought to be licensed.
Right. No, that's the question that we're looking at.
But we're not reviewing a property by definition. We're reviewing the work.
You're reviewing the work
of an appraiser.
But that is still under USPAP, so you still should hold.
You should check with USPAP experts greater than I.
Okay, if you have people that you want me, I don't really know those people. If you have people
it's not a USPAP, it is more, it's shifting under qualifications and state law. USPAP doesn't say you have to be
licensed. Danny Wiley is your answer.
No, I disagree with that.
Okay.
I disagree wholeheartedly because he comes from an he's tainted on the ANC side.
I don't think so.
I think so. And here's the thing, and it shifts to an argument that exists is national licensing.
Gentlemen, if I could just get a clarifying point here for not only myself, but I think for some of the staff that are on the call on the WebEx. This is, I guess, kind of a yes or no question, but if somebody was to call us today, let's just say, and ask the question, can I do a review if I'm in the state of Tennessee as unlicensed? The answer is yes, correct?
Unlicensed altogether?
Well, that's what we're discussing here, right? And that's where, here's the problem. In the past, they were told yes. But the question is that truly the case?
Maybe I'm confused then.
Hi, Michael. This is William. I can interject.
Sure, go ahead.
So when someone contacts us either by phone or by email to ask whether or not they can do something, the short answer is I tell them that we are not permitted to interpret rules or laws. I can give them the applicable rules, but I do not interpret them. So I do not give them permission to conduct reviews, etc. So I'll refer them to the rule or law dealing with that, but I do not interpret it and I do not make a determination in their case. So that's how we treat those.
Yeah,
that sounds like a perfect answer.
Yeah, and that's
I agree, but unfortunately, in years past, that wasn't the answer given.
right. So no, and like in any situation where someone is asking can they or cannot do a certain activity, that's going to be the response. We're going to provide you the specific rules and the specific statutes on it, and then it's up to that individual to make their own determination, either by themselves or if they have counsel, whatever, to decide what they're going to do. So that's kind of how I've understood that it's been going on since I've been here, and that is what we will use moving forward until we decide at this next very long and contentious meeting what our thoughts are about standards 1, 2, and 3, and what applies to USPAP and what doesn't. So I think this was helpful to understand kind of what the issue is and the tension, and so it'll.
Yeah, and there are cases, and I've had in years past where appraisers have called and fussed. A retired banker is doing appraisal reviews, and they're not licensed in the state of Tennessee. So, you know, the question comes, should they be licensed?
Right.
I think you and I were talking about two different things. We're going to belabor this thing. I was assuming they were at least licensed in some state, but you're saying they're not licensed at all.
And that's where it needs to be cleared up. And that's what I'm asking. Let's just be, because there seems to be some miscommunication and different things going on. If we come out and say yay or nay, it clears it up.
So we're going to be, is it one question or two questions? Is one question, do you have to be licensed at all, period? And is the second question, do you have to be licensed in Tennessee? Two questions. Okay.
I'd like to make just one point on that. There's a lot more depth on that on the residential side. You know, you talked about providing comparables. What about a reconsideration request? They're providing sales from the lender. Is that considered a review? I mean, VA has a reconsideration policy where they have a reviewer who's not even an appraiser providing that information. And so I think it is important we want to talk about it, but we also don't want to create a bottleneck on the residential side where these reports can't be reviewed, or at least we provide some sort of consideration to that.
And it may not hurt.
There's a third question.
It may not hurt to discuss it with another state that has, and Kentucky is one.
Right, no, I would, usually in those kind of circumstances, I look at, states that are very similar to us, because they are kind of have the same kind of idea, so I'm likely not going to, consult someone in Hawaii or Alaska, even though I'm sure they're very knowledgeable, in that kind of circumstance. So, I will look into that. And if I have any questions specifically during the research, gathering, interview, whatever situation, I'll reach out to you directly.
Just one other thing, in USPAP, one guideline we always have, that regardless of which of these three questions you're asking, is the individual competent to do this job? And if they're not competent to do this job, then we have jurisdiction over that.
Right.
And I think that's how the definitions sort of protect that. Mm-hmm. Very good. I think it's just something we need to get cleared up going forward because the day is coming. Moving on, one added new business is the Aero Conference that will be held mid-October. And that's one reason why our meeting is no longer in October, it's in November, because it was always the timing of it. The Aero Conference wrapped up on that Monday of our meeting. And so a couple of years ago, we moved this meeting, or the October meeting, to November.
Okay. Next meeting scheduled for November 8th. So, Aero, I don't know the dates of Aero off the top of my head, but
I think it's about October 18th.
Live meeting or?
It is live in DC.
Okay.
October 15th through October 18th, which is a Friday through a Monday.
okay, so in the past, has this board ever sent members of the commission to the conference? I know this is, like you're all aware, this is my first time, and especially dealing with travel. What has been the process, and how, how do we decide who goes? Would you all like to discuss that?
Yeah, that's usually what we end up doing, and it usually comes down to everyone's schedule on who can go. And I was trying to remember, we either sent 2 or 3.
I think we sent 2, and then Commissioner Thomas always paid his own way if 2 others wanted to go. I think that's the way it was. We ended up with 3 most of the time.
Right.
But paying for 2.
Paying for 2.
Correct. Okay.
I think we first asked for volunteers who would like to go, and you can do that right now. And
sure.
See
and
who wants to go.
Right. and 2, there's a conference in the spring in San Antonio. But we usually hit every conference, the spring and fall.
Someone might go in the fall, somebody else goes in the spring.
Sure, that makes sense.
Pass it around.
Right.
I've been, so I will withdraw. I will not go to this one, so somebody else can go.
Okay, well then let's start with your suggestion, then, Mr. Atwood, and say who would like to go.
I've never been, and I would like to go. And also, too, there's a lot of new commissioners here. We didn't do this last year, and looks like there's a lot of money available. Is there an opportunity for anybody who wants to go this year, or do we want to cap it at 2? I don't know what it costs per person, but
I would need to check with probably our fiscal team and departmental folks about if there are limitations as to how many we can send per board. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I'd say at this point, though, since it sounds like traditionally and historically there's been two, we can go ahead and decide on
Well,
two.
Anna also gets to go. I don't know if that's everything or not.
Yeah, Anna and you.
Okay.
Because I think Sarah and Roxanna both went. And typically it would end up after, one of them couldn't go because of schedules, but there were some. And I think it would be good for you to go, being new to the profession,
Sure.
to get a little bit of insight to it.
I'm perfectly familiar with DC, so. Okay, so Mr. Mansfield and
I'm available to go as well, but I'll give opportunity to everybody else whoever wants to go. I mean, I would like to learn these things, but not in a rush.
okay. Anyone else volunteering for the October?
Yeah, I could go either way, but I would open it up if there's a new member or something.
Okay.
Over doesn't work. I might be interested in the spring meeting.
San Antonio's more appealing.
I just went. It was hot. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we've got two, Mr. Mansfield and Dr. Jane. We can go ahead and put that in, and I'll check on additional spots. I'll start with talking to the assistant commissioner and those folks at fiscal and make sure that we have the ability to do that. Dr. Jane and Mr. Mansfield, I'll be in touch with you regarding information for travel and all that sort of stuff.
With that, I think that concludes. We'll entertain the most favorite motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Have a motion and a second.
To be clear, that motion is for adjournment.
Yeah.
Adjournment. That's correct.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.